Lilith is said to have been the woman before Eve, made from the same earth as Adam. She refused to lie beneath him. She spoke the hidden name of God, rose into the air, and escaped Eden. 3 angels pursued her to the Red Sea, but she would not return. In later stories, she became a winged night demon, a killer of infants, the bride of Samael and the mother of monsters. In modern stories, she can be a feminist ancestor, a cosmic mother, a witch, or the ruler of a dark fantasy world. There is only one immediate problem. Genesis never names her. The creation stories describe the first humans, the garden, the serpent, Adam and Eve. They do not tell us that Adam had a wife called Lilith. The famous tale survives in full in a medieval work written many centuries after the biblical text, yet the name and the fears gathered around it are much older. Long before Lilith became one rebellious woman, related words described dangerous spirits in Mesopotamia. A single mysterious term entered Isaiah's ruined wilderness. A Lilith appeared among demons in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Families in late antique Mesopotamia wrote the names of Liliths into bowls and buried protective texts around their homes. So the real question is not whether one forbidden chapter was cut from Genesis. It is more interesting than that. How did scattered night spirits, wilderness language, household fears, and protective rituals become Adam's first wife? And how did that demonized wife become one of the most desired symbols of female refusal in modern culture? To answer that, we have to let every period speak in its own voice, even when those voices disagree. The opening chapters of Genesis place 2 creation sequences beside one another. In the first, creation unfolds across a structured series of days. Humanity appears as male and female, and both receive the command to fill the earth. The passage is brief and cosmic. It does not narrate the making of one woman after another, and it gives neither human a personal name at that moment. The second account narrows the view. A human is formed from the ground and placed in a garden. The animals are brought forward, but none is a corresponding partner. The woman is then built from the human side. Only after the expulsion from the garden does the man call her Eve. Ancient and medieval readers noticed the difference. They did what readers often do when sacred stories overlap. They asked how both could be true. Some interpretations harmonized the passages. Others imagined an earlier female creation before the woman formed from Adam's side. Rabbinic literature contains discussions of a first Eve, but those discussions do not simply equal the later Lilith narrative. The familiar equation of that earlier woman with Lilith requires more steps. This distinction matters because a modern conspiracy claim begins by treating interpretation as evidence of deletion. It says Genesis once contained Lilith, then authorities removed her because she was too independent. The surviving manuscript record does not demonstrate that. What it demonstrates is a productive gap. Genesis offered 2 differently shaped accounts. Later storytellers used that opening to answer new questions about sex, hierarchy, marriage, danger, and equality. Lilith would eventually enter that gap, but when we travel back toward the oldest evidence connected with her name, we do not find a single woman standing outside Eden. We find a much less stable world, categories of spirits, fragments of incantations, difficult words, and beings whose identities shift with the text that contains them. The trail begins in ancient Mesopotamia, but not with a neat birth certificate for Lilith. Cuneiform texts preserve terms commonly transliterated as Lilu, Lilitu, and Lili. They appear in lexical lists, magical material, medical contexts, and literature across long periods. Their meanings are not identical in every source, and translating them with one modern label can create a false sense of certainty. The masculine Lilu and feminine Lilitu are often treated as kinds of dangerous or restless spirits. Lili is frequently understood as a female figure marked by frustrated sexuality or an incomplete social life, sometimes imagined in relation to young men. Some interpretations connect these beings with wind. Others emphasize night, illness, erotic dreams, or the unsettled dead. The evidence is scattered and the categories changed over time. Even the familiar explanation that makes Lilith's name mean night needs qualification. The similarity between Hebrew Lila, meaning night, and Lilith encouraged ancient and later associations, but resemblance does not settle etymology. Mesopotamian spellings and loan relationships point to a more complicated history. Ancient scribes could also reinterpret an inherited foreign term through a word that sounded meaningful in their own language. The result is not a choice between night and wind with one simple winner. It is a name that accumulated both associations while moving between languages. That instability is the first important fact about Lilith. At the beginning, we are not looking at one immortal character moving through history with the same face and motives. We are looking at a family of terms inside a much larger Mesopotamian supernatural ecology. Ancient households and ritual experts lived among named gods, protective beings, ghosts, illnesses, winds, demons, omens, and forces that do not fit modern divisions between religion, medicine, and magic. Later Jewish Lilith is linguistically and culturally related to this Mesopotamian background, but a related word is not the same thing as an unchanged biography. The transition from a class of spirits to a singular woman required centuries of selection and invention. It also required new social settings. A spirit feared in sleep is not automatically the same as a demon named in a household divorce formula. A plural group of Liliths is not automatically the singular first wife of Adam. This is where popular accounts often move too fast. They say Lilith began as a Sumerian goddess, was worshipped across Mesopotamia, then entered the Bible under disguise. But specialist sources do not give us that clean line. The terms are real. Their danger is real within the texts. The exact identities are difficult. Evidence for a great suppressed Lilith cult is not. What does carry forward is a cluster of possibilities. A female-coded being at the boundary of ordinary life, danger connected with night, sexuality, illness, reproduction, and the household, and the belief that words, names, and ritual knowledge could hold such danger at a distance. Those possibilities would later gather around the name Lilith with extraordinary force. One Sumerian story is repeatedly introduced online as Lilith's first appearance. In the composition now called Gilgamesh, Enkidu and the Netherworld, a tree growing beside the Euphrates is torn loose and carried away. Inanna rescues it and plants it in her garden, hoping one day to make furniture from its wood. Years pass, but the tree cannot be used. A serpent has settled at its roots, a great bird has built a nest in its branches, and a female supernatural being has made her home in its trunk. Older English translations helped make this scene famous by calling that being Lilith. The image is irresistible. Serpent below, bird above, a mysterious woman inside the sacred tree. It seems to offer an ancient prototype for every later version at once. The current Oxford translation is more cautious and renders the figure as a phantom maid. Specialists debate the underlying term, the textual reconstruction, and its relationship to Akkadian spirit vocabulary. Even if a connection with later Lilith traditions is accepted, the scene still does not give us Adam-Eve equality, exile from Eden, infant danger, or the three angels. Those belong to other periods. The Huluppu tree therefore teaches us two things. First, ancient Mesopotamian literature did imagine female supernatural beings occupying dangerous thresholds between cultivated space and wilderness. Second, translation can create a character more definite than the source allows. Once the word Lilith entered a popular translation, images and summaries repeated it until a proposal began to look like an identification. We can keep the scene without pretending the debate is over. It belongs in Lilith's history as a contested ancestor, a place where later readers recognized her shape. It does not belong as proof that the complete medieval legend was already hidden inside a Sumerian tree. If the Huluppu tree is the most famous textual shortcut, the Burney relief is the most famous visual one. The large fired clay plaque shows a naked winged goddess standing frontally on the backs of two lions. Her feet end in bird-like talons. Owls stand beside her. She holds the rod and ring symbols of Mesopotamian divinity, and a horned headdress rises above her carefully modeled face. Today, the object is in the British Museum, which dates it to the 19th or 18th century BCE and calls it the Queen of the Night. That title is intentionally cautious. The plaque contains no surviving inscription that names the figure. Scholars have proposed several identities, especially Inanna or Ishtar, Ereshkigal, and Lilith. Each proposal tries to explain a different combination of wings, nocturnal animals, lions, nudity, talons, and divine insignia. The Lilith identification became exceptionally popular outside specialist debate. It offers something texts rarely provide: a complete, beautiful, frightening body. Reproductions place the relief on book covers, occult altars, tattoos, social posts, and videos. The image then seems to confirm the story attached to it. Wings prove the Talmudic Lilith, owls prove the night creature in Isaiah. Lions and nudity prove sexual power. But this chain begins with an uncertain name. The museum object can still play a central role in our investigation. It shows how a Mesopotamian goddess could be represented, how divine power joined human and animal anatomy, and how modern audiences search ancient art for Lilith. What it cannot do is settle her appearance. Calling the figure the Queen of the Night is not an evasive museum trick. It is a reminder that responsible history sometimes preserves a question. The relief may be Lilith. It may be another goddess entirely. The most reproduced ancient portrait of Lilith has never securely told us its name. Another Mesopotamian figure seems even closer to the later Lilith. Lamashtu threatened pregnancy, mothers, infants, health, sleep, and the household. Surviving amulets show her with a lion-like head, clawed hands, bird talons, and animals at her breasts. Incantations name her directly. Ritual objects offer gifts, command her departure, or show the demon Pazuzu forcing her back toward the underworld. The resemblance is real. Centuries later, Lilith would also be feared around childbirth and infants. Protective objects would name her, bind her, threaten her, and display powers meant to drive her away. It is easy to describe Lamashtu as the Babylonian Lilith. But that description erases precisely what the evidence gives us. Lamashtu is not a vague member of a spirit class. She has her own name, iconography, ritual texts, and mythology. The Metropolitan Museum's obsidian amulet imprisons her image within an inscribed protective object. Other plaques show Pazuzu confronting her. Pazuzu himself was dangerous, associated with destructive winds, yet his frightening power could be directed against an even more immediate threat. Ancient supernatural categories were not a simple war between good angels and evil demons. Lamashtu matters because she reveals the environment in which later fears developed. Pregnancy and birth were physically dangerous. Infant mortality was painfully familiar. A household needed protection at doors, beds, bodies, and unseen boundaries. Ritual specialists answered those dangers with names, images, offerings, incantations, and portable objects. Some motifs could travel from one being to another. Communities could inherit a protective problem even when they changed the demon's name. But comparison is not identity. Lamashtu is not Lilith wearing an older costume. She is evidence that the cultures of Mesopotamia already possessed powerful ways to imagine female supernatural danger long before the medieval first wife entered Eden. The Hebrew Bible brings us closer to the later name, but only for one verse. Isaiah chapter 34 imagines judgment as the collapse of an inhabited land into a wilderness. Streams become pitch, smoke rises, human rule disappears, and uncanny animals occupy the ruins. Among jackals, desert creatures, birds, and goat-like beings, the Hebrew text includes the word Lilith. What should that word become in English? Some translations preserve Lilith as a proper name. Others offer night creature, night monster, night bird, or screech owl. Ancient translators also made choices, sometimes replacing the unfamiliar being with creatures their audiences recognized. The surrounding passage encourages both zoological and demonological readings because ancient wilderness catalogs do not respect the categories modern readers expect. A ruined place can belong simultaneously to animals, monsters, and forces of chaos. The verse proves something important and limited. A Hebrew form of the name existed in biblical tradition, and it belonged in a scene of desolation and nocturnal habitation. It does not say that Lilith was Adam's wife. It does not mention Eden, equality, a divine name, infant danger, or angelic pursuers. The temptation is to read backward. Once we know the medieval story, the single biblical word seems like a hidden doorway into all of it. But Isaiah's Lilith should first be allowed to remain where the text places her, resting in devastated wilderness among other non-human inhabitants. That location will matter later. Lilith repeatedly occupies spaces beyond controlled domestic order. Desert, night, abandoned buildings, the edge of sleep, the outside of marriage, the border of a home. Isaiah does not give her a biography. It gives later imagination a habitat. A fragment from Qumran moves Lilith from prophetic wilderness into a clearer demonological company. The texts known as the Songs of the Sage, preserved in manuscripts 4Q510 and 4Q511, are protective hymns. Their speaker proclaims divine splendor in order to terrify destructive spirits. In one damaged list, Lilith appears among demons, howlers, bastard spirits, and beings that attack without warning. The manuscripts are fragmentary, and their reconstruction requires care. Yet this occurrence is difficult to reduce to an ordinary bird. Lilith belongs to a catalogue of threatening supernatural forces opposed by liturgical speech. The text is generally dated paleographically to around the late 1st century BCE, many centuries before the alphabet of Ben Sira. The physical condition of the scroll matters. Modern editions arrange tiny leather fragments, damaged letters, parallel copies, and educated reconstructions into lines that look much more complete on a printed page than they are in the cave. That does not make the reading imaginary. It means confidence belongs to particular letters and phrases, not to a lost surrounding story. Qumran gives us a securely ancient demonological context for Lilith, but the silence around her identity must remain part of the evidence. This makes the Songs of the Sage an important bridge, but not the bridge popular legend sometimes wants. It demonstrates a Jewish Lilith in a protective demonological setting before the medieval first wife narrative. It does not tell us that the Qumran community knew her as Adam's former partner. No argument with Adam survives here. No 3 angels negotiate at the Red Sea. No reason for her danger is supplied. What survives is a ritual logic. Harmful spirits can approach human beings. Correct praise and divine authority can frighten them away. Lilith's name has become specific enough to stand inside that threatening assembly. The night creature of one biblical verse is now part of a world against which a community speaks protection. In later centuries, those protective words would move from scrolls and hymns onto objects placed beneath actual homes. The Babylonian Talmud preserves several brief Lilith references. Read together, they feel like pieces of a portrait. Read carefully, they remain separate arguments in separate contexts. In Reuven, a discussion of consequences attributed to Eve includes the comparison that a woman grows her hair long like Lilith. The line later contributes to Lilith's association with untamed or dangerous hair. It is not a beauty description and not a scene from her life. In Niddah, a legal discussion asks how to classify an unusual miscarriage. A form resembling a Lilith is described as human-faced and winged. The passage is concerned with ritual status, not with proving the biological existence of a demon. Still, it provides one of the clearest rabbinic visual attributes: wings joined to a human-like face. In Shabbat, Rabbi Hanina warns against sleeping alone in a house because the solitary sleeper may be seized by Lilith. Here she enters the vulnerable interval of night, isolation, and sleep. Later traditions connect that interval with erotic dreams and nocturnal emissions, but the short warning should not be forced to carry every later explanation. Bhava Batra offers something stranger. In a sequence of extravagant travel tales, a figure called Horman or Herman, son of Lilith, races along the city wall with impossible speed. The episode belongs to a deliberately marvelous literary world. It tells us that Lilith could be imagined as having offspring, but it does not give a stable genealogy. Hair, wings, human features, solitary sleep, a supernatural sun, these elements can be assembled into the Lilith modern audiences recognize. The Talmud itself does not assemble them for us. Its allusions assume a cultural familiarity that the surviving lines only partly reveal. This fragmented quality is historically valuable. Lilith was not waiting in one official biography. She circulated through sayings, legal analogies, warnings, stories, and local fears. Different listeners could know different versions. The gaps made later synthesis possible. When medieval authors eventually gave her a complete conflict with Adam, they were joining a name already surrounded by wings, danger, sex, and the night. The most intimate evidence for late antique Lilith does not come from a grand temple or royal monument. It comes from ordinary ceramic bowls. Across Sasanian Mesopotamia, ritual practitioners wrote protective incantations in spirals across the inside of household vessels. The surviving corpus includes Jewish Babylonian Aramaic, Mandaic, Syriac, and other languages. Some bowls draw a bound figure at the center. Some invoke scripture, angels, divine names, legal formulas, or cosmic powers. Archaeological examples were placed around domestic spaces, sometimes inverted beneath floors, thresholds, courtyards, or rooms. The exact placement and function must be established object by object, but their broad purpose is protective. Not every incantation bowl names Lilith. Not every bowl is Jewish. Those two corrections are essential because popular summaries often turn an entire regional technology into one standardized Lilith trap. Specific bowls, however, do name Liliths with extraordinary directness. A Jewish Babylonian Aramaic bowl in the British Museum uses language resembling a bill of divorce to expel a Lilith from a client's life. The demon is ordered to accept separation, property boundaries, and exclusion as if a dangerous supernatural attachment were an unwanted marriage. Another bowl names a bewitching Lilith haunting a particular house. Mandaic bowls bind and shackle named Liliths, subjugate them, or list several Liliths rather than one universal queen. These objects make fear local. The text does not only speak about a demon in mythic time, it names clients, households, spouses, children, illnesses, dreams, and hostile forces. A bowl could transform writing into a boundary around a family. The circular movement of the inscription, the central figure, the invoked names, and the placement of the object all participated in that protection, though we should resist simplistic claims that every spiral literally lured a demon into a trap. The bowls also complicate the idea of one Lilith. Plurals are common, named variants appear. Male and female Liliths can inhabit a wider demonic population. A client might fear a spirit attached to one person or property rather than the singular ex-wife of Adam. At the same time, several motifs that later surround the first wife are now materially visible. Domestic invasion, sexual or marital attachment, danger around reproduction, the power of names, and the belief that a written object can enforce supernatural separation. Ben Sira's three angels and Amulet do not emerge from nothing. They enter a world in which households had already been writing protection against Liliths for centuries. The bowls are therefore more than illustrations. They are evidence of practice. Someone commissioned the words, someone wrote them, someone placed the vessel where unseen danger was expected to cross. Beneath a floor, mythology became household technology. Protection around pregnancy and infancy appears across many cultures of the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East. Greek and Byzantine traditions feared Gelo or Jilu. Syriac and Mandaean texts addressed harmful spirits within their own cosmologies. Iranian and Caucasian folklore knew the childbirth being called Al. Arabic manuscript and folk traditions include figures such as al-Sibian, the mother of boys. The names, texts, and religious systems differ, but the social wound is recognizable. Birth was dangerous, infants died, and grief demanded an enemy that ritual knowledge might defeat. Stories also traveled. A saint, angel, prophet, or holy figure meets the female demon on her way to harm a household. He forces her to reveal secret names. She promises not to enter a place where those names are displayed. The pattern appears in different languages with different opponents and demons. These narratives function like verbal locks. The protective object does not merely display a symbol. It retells the moment when the threat was defeated and makes that victory present at a vulnerable bedside. Names are especially important because naming can expose, classify, and command a force that otherwise moves unseen. A long list of a demon's secret names may look repetitive to a modern reader, but in ritual logic it closes escape routes. Whatever name the intruder uses, the text claims authority over it. This does not mean Gelo, Al-Sibian, Lamashtu, and Lilith were always one being. It means communities exchanged formulas while preserving different supernatural maps. Similar danger can produce similar ritual solutions even without direct borrowing. In Jewish Lilith traditions, the protective names Senoi, Sansanoi, and Samangelof become especially famous. Their written or pictured presence near a mother or child marks a boundary Lilith is required to respect. The medieval alphabet of Ben Sira will explain those names through a dramatic encounter at the sea. The amulet at the cradle transforms loss into procedure. Write the names, display the figures, tell the story, bind the threat to a promise. It is not modern medicine, but it is an attempt to make a terrifyingly unpredictable world negotiable. When Lilith finally meets Adam in a complete surviving narrative, that story is already designed to explain why an amulet works. The story most people call Ancient Lilith enters the record in full in the alphabet of Ben Sira, generally dated to the 9th or 10th century in the Islamic world, probably Abbasid Baghdad. This is not the biblical wisdom of Ben Sira. It is a later anonymous work that places outrageous tales and clever answers in the mouth of a legendary sage. Its humor can be crude. Its stories can be transgressive. Calling it satire does not make it culturally unimportant, but it warns us not to read it as a missing page of Genesis. The Lilith episode begins with a practical crisis. The young son of King Nebuchadnezzar is ill. Ben Sira prepares an amulet bearing a holy name and the names and forms of 3 healing angels, Senoi, Sansanoi, and Samangelof. When the king asks who they are, Ben Sira tells their story. After Adam is created alone, God makes a woman from the earth as Adam was made from the earth. Her name is Lilith. Adam and Lilith immediately quarrel over who will lie beneath the other during sex. Adam demands the superior position. Lilith refuses. Her argument is not that she needs no relationship, but that equal material should mean equal status. Both came from the ground. Neither yields. Lilith pronounces the ineffable divine name and flies away. Adam appeals to God, who sends the 3 angels after her. They find her at the sea and order her to return. The story now joins sexual rebellion to the older world of infant protection. Lilith refuses Eden and accepts a terrible fate involving the deaths of demonic offspring. In return, she swears that when she sees the names or images of the 3 angels on an amulet, she will not harm the protected child. The narrative is powerful because it fuses traditions that once circulated separately. The textual tension between the 2 creation accounts supplies the opening. Older Lilith demonology supplies the dangerous name. Wings and flight echo rabbinic motifs. Household amulets and angel names supply the practical purpose. Sexual hierarchy supplies the conflict. A protective object receives an origin story. Modern retellings often remove the frame. They keep the equality argument and the escape from Adam, then omit the sick child, the angels, the threatened infants, and the demonic deaths. That selective version turns Lilith into a clean heroine. Other retellings remove her argument and preserve only the child-killing demon, turning her into a clean villain. Ben Sira's Lilith is harder to domesticate. She is both the woman who refuses subordination and the supernatural threat an amulet is built to stop. The late date does not make the story fake. Myths are not valuable only when they are primordial. The medieval author created a synthesis so effective that it reorganized how earlier evidence would be remembered. After Ben Sira, a word in Isaiah could be read as Adam's exile. A winged form in the Talmud could be read as the woman who flew from Eden. Mesopotamian spirits could become her ancient childhood. This is the decisive transformation. Lilith is no longer only a kind of being or a name inside protective magic. She has a motive. She has dialogue. She makes a choice. She becomes a character who can be condemned, feared, admired, and reclaimed. Medieval Kabbalah did not simply repeat Ben Sira. It placed Lilith inside increasingly elaborate maps of cosmic evil. In the 13th century treatise on the left emanation, attributed to Isaac ben Jacob HaKohen, evil is organized as a structured realm rather than a loose population of demons. Samael and Lilith appear as a paired counterpart to Adam and Eve. The text develops demonic couples, genealogies, and powers on the left side of emanation. It also distinguishes an elder Lilith associated with Samael from a younger Lilith associated with Asmodeus in one influential system. This is a major innovation. Lilith is no longer merely outside a household or outside Eden. She becomes a dark counterpart within the architecture of the cosmos. Sexual union among demonic powers threatens multiplication. Serpentine imagery, forbidden coupling, nocturnal emission, and the production of spirits connect human conduct to that cosmic realm. The Zoharic corpus and later Kabbalah preserve multiple Lilith traditions rather than one official doctrine. In some passages, she is a seductress who approaches men at night. In others, she appears in relation to Samael, the serpent, the moon, impurity, exile, or the other side. She can stand as a destructive opposite to holy feminine presence. Different texts and later commentators arrange these motifs differently. Popular summaries often collapse all of this into the phrase, Satan's wife. That translation is too simple. Samael's identity and role shift across Jewish literature, and Kabbalistic demonology is not equivalent to a modern Christian hierarchy ruled by one devil. The pairing is real within particular medieval mystical texts, but it should be named as a development, not projected into Genesis or ancient Mesopotamia. Kabbalah gives Lilith grandeur. The domestic demon becomes queenly, cosmic, mirrored, and erotic. Her danger is no longer limited to one cradle or sleeper. She participates in a universe where holy and unholy structures reflect one another, where broken relationships above and below affect the world, and where sexuality can have cosmic consequences. This dark queen would profoundly shape later occultism and art. Yet even here there is no final Lilith. The elder and younger figures, the wife of Samael, the serpent, the night visitor, and the enemy of sacred union do not always align. Kabbalah multiplies her while making her seem singular. European literature and art gradually moved Lilith from the nursery and demonological diagram into the intimate space of desire. Goethe's Faust introduces her as Adam's first wife and warns that her beautiful hair is the snare with which she captures men. The old rabbinic comparison to long hair now becomes a central erotic image. The supernatural threat is translated into the language of seduction. Dante Gabriel Rossetti made that transformation visible in Lady Lilith, begun in the 1860s and altered in the following decade. His Lilith is not a winged monster crossing a desert. She is a contemporary beauty in a private room, absorbed in combing her long hair before a mirror. Flowers, fabric, pale skin, and luxurious texture replace the bowl, amulet, and ruined wilderness. Rossetti reinforced the painting with a companion poem later titled Body's Beauty. The poem calls Lilith Adam's first wife, gives her the enduring beauty of the serpent, and turns her hair into an instrument of enchantment. Text and image create a feedback loop. Viewers see a self-absorbed modern woman because the poem names her Lilith, then read the ancient legend through the face in the painting. Her danger no longer has to be shown attacking anyone. It resides in the possibility that beauty, attention, and desire can reverse the expected direction of control. The painting belongs to a Victorian culture fascinated and threatened by female beauty, sexuality, and self-possession. Lilith becomes the femme fatale, a woman whose autonomy appears dangerous because it does not exist for male comfort. Rossetti's image is not historically Jewish costume, and not an attempt at archaeological reconstruction. It is a modern woman carrying an old name. That shift changes what viewers can identify with. Few people wish to become a child-threatening demon. Many can identify with a woman who refuses to be subordinate, leaves an unequal relationship, and looks into her own mirror. Art did not erase the demon completely. It aestheticized danger and moved the conflict inward, toward attraction, fear, and the politics of looking. The modern Lilith was now ready to be reclaimed, not despite her exile, but because of it. In the 20th century, writers and activists began reading Lilith's refusal as the center of her story rather than the cause of her punishment. The same medieval scene could now support a radically different judgment. If Adam insists on hierarchy and Lilith insists that equal creation means equal status, exile can look like integrity. This reclamation is not the recovery of a secret ancient feminist scripture. It is a modern act of interpretation. Its power comes from choosing which inheritance to continue. That distinction protects the modern reading rather than weakening it. A symbol does not need to have carried the same politics in every century to become politically useful now. Reclamation openly argues with the archive. It can say that a medieval author meant Lilith as a warning, and that a modern reader nevertheless recognizes the justice of her demand for equality. The historical claim and the ethical judgment answer different questions. In 1976, Lilith magazine began publishing as an independent Jewish feminist periodical. The name turned a demonized outsider into a declaration that Jewish women's questions, experiences, bodies, and authority would not remain at the edge of communal life. The magazine did not need Lilith to have been a historical goddess. It needed the cultural memory of a woman punished for refusing her assigned place. Lilith Fair performed a related transformation in the music industry. Beginning in 1997, the touring festival placed women artists together on major stages at a time when executives and programmers routinely claimed audiences would not accept multiple women in sequence. The solitary exile became collective infrastructure. A name once attached to the dangerous woman outside the household now marked women building a space outside male gatekeeping. Modern occult and esoteric traditions also adopted Lilith as goddess, demon, initiator, sexual power, dark moon, shadow, or adversarial mother. These systems differ sharply from one another. Some draw from Kabbalah, some from ceremonial magic, some from modern witchcraft, psychology, Satanism, astrology, or personal revelation. Their Liliths are real as modern religious creations, but their claims about antiquity require independent evidence. Online dark feminine culture brings these strands together. Lilith is placed beside Medusa, Hecate, Kali, and other historically separate figures. The collage can be meaningful as contemporary identity and art. It becomes misleading only when modern combination is presented as proof that all these figures were once one suppressed goddess. Reclamation does not end Lilith's ambiguity. It reverses the moral camera. The qualities once used to make her monstrous refusal, sexuality, independence, anger, life outside approved structures, become reasons to claim her. Popular culture does not inherit one Lilith. It chooses from an archive. Neon Genesis Evangelion takes the names Adam, Lilith, Lilin, angels, and the Dead Sea Scrolls and places them inside an original science fiction apocalypse. Its Lilith is a cosmic progenitor connected with humanity itself. She is not primarily Adam's disobedient wife, nor a child-threatening night demon. The name helps construct a mysterious theology of origins, rival forms of life, and forced human unity. The adaptation expands Lilith from mother of demons to source of the human species. Its religious vocabulary is powerful precisely because it is recombined rather than faithfully reproduced. The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina makes another selection. Its Lilith, also called Madam Satan, draws on the first wife, the witch, the demonic consort, the manipulator, and the woman seeking power within a hierarchy ruled by a male Dark Lord. Across the series, she moves between servant and rival, victim and perpetrator, mother and claimant to a throne. Jewish folklore is blended with Christian horror, modern witch imagery, and contemporary television's fascination with morally unstable anti-heroines. Diablo IV gathers still more layers. Its Lilith is the daughter of hatred, partner in a forbidden union, co-creator of sanctuary, mother of humanity's exceptional potential, rebel against cosmic war, and a source of catastrophic coercion. She offers liberation from one oppressive order while demanding obedience to her own plan. The player is invited to understand why her critique attracts followers without accepting the suffering she causes. The medieval exile has become an interactive anti-villain and creator-mother. Comics, fantasy novels, music, role-playing games, and online art repeat the pattern. One work chooses the winged demon, another chooses Adam's equal. Another chooses the bride of Samael, the mother of monsters, the red-haired femme fatale, the dark moon, or the woman who would rather leave paradise than submit. Sometimes only the name survives. Television and games also give Lilith something older texts rarely provide: sustained interiority. A recurring character needs goals, alliances, betrayals, vulnerability, and change. That requirement turns a warning at the edge of a text into a point of view. It also favors moral ambiguity. Pure monsters are useful for one scene, but a season of television or a long game asks why followers listen, why enemies hesitate, and what freedom costs when its champion also seeks power. Lilith's contradictory inheritance is unusually suited to that form. These reinventions should not be judged by whether they reproduce a source word for word. Adaptation always transforms. The historical question is different. Which older motif does the new work borrow? What does it change? And what does its own era need Lilith to mean? Evangelion needed a cosmic origin hidden beneath technological modernity. Sabrina needed a woman negotiating power inside patriarchal hell. Diablo needed a creator whose rebellion could be both persuasive and terrifying. Feminist media needed a name for refusal. Occult communities needed a figure of shadow and forbidden knowledge. Social media often needs an instantly recognizable image of dangerous autonomy. The result is a Lilith more famous than any one ancient text. She appears with horns that do not define her oldest sources, in colors chosen by modern fantasy, beside symbols from unrelated traditions, speaking lines that no medieval manuscript contains. That distance from antiquity is not a defect to hide. It is the newest layer of her history. Lilith survived because no age inherited her unchanged. Mesopotamia supplied related spirit names and a world of dangerous thresholds. Isaiah gave a Lilith a resting place in ruins. Qumran placed Lilith among destructive spirits. Rabbinic texts left wings, hair, sleep, and strange offspring. Incantation bowls brought Liliths beneath the floor of the home. Ben Sira gave one of them a voice, an argument with Adam, and a choice to leave. Kabbalah built a dark queen. Artists made her beautiful. Feminists made her refusal speak again. Popular culture made her mother, witch, monster, and creator. The real history of Lilith is not the discovery of one forbidden woman hidden intact for 4,000 years. It is the history of transformation. Each culture looked into the night and saw a different danger. Later generation looked into that inherited darkness and chose a different face. That is why two claims that sound opposed can both be true. Lilith is not named as Adam's wife in Genesis, and the story of Lilith as Adam's first wife is culturally important. The Queen of the Night is not securely identified as Lilith, and that image has genuinely shaped modern Lilith. Lamashtu is a distinct Mesopotamian demon, and comparison with her helps us understand the ancient fears later attached to Lilith. Historical caution does not drain the mystery. It reveals how many human decisions were required to build it. The layers also explain why arguments about Lilith become arguments about authority. Is the oldest text allowed to define her forever? Does a community that feared her own the final meaning of her name? Can people marked as dangerous inherit the monster and speak through it? History cannot decide those ethical questions for us. It can show which voices entered when, which claims rest on objects and manuscripts, and which identities were created by later readers. What we do with that knowledge belongs to the present. The method is simple to describe and difficult to practice. Date each source before combining it with another. Ask whether an image identifies itself or received its name from a modern viewer. Separate a word's earliest occurrence from the later biography attached to it. Treat a ritual bowl as evidence for what its client feared and did, not as a transparent photograph of a supernatural world. Let a medieval satire be medieval, a Kabbalistic cosmology be Kabbalistic, and a modern game be modern. Only then can connections be drawn without flattening 4,000 years into a single secret tradition. That discipline does not produce one final answer to the question, who is Lilith? It produces a better map of everyone who has answered it. Lilith is the figure in that mirror. Spirit, demon, first wife, exile, queen, rebel, mother, monster, and icon. Every surviving layer keeps the night open to another interpretation. What changes is not only Lilith, it is what the people looking at her are prepared to fear and what they are prepared to reclaim.